Canada, Britain, Germany, France. If you try to help the ICC, we're going to sanction you.
Well, that means I want every ally, and you saw little Justin in Canada and his position. What should the penalty be?
We should crush your economy because we're next.
NATO is an extremely serious affair these days. What to do with Russia and Ukraine? There's a serious division of opinion. Donald Trump has expressed his interest in wrapping things up immediately. Joe Biden does not share that view and has in fact been sending new sophisticated weapon systems. The UK has sent their Storm Shadow missile, the United States the ATACMS missile system. Now there's conversations between the UK and France about actually sending ground troops to Ukraine. All of this happening in a compressed window of time before Trump takes office. In other words, grave matters, whatever side of those debates you're on. The world is in a very serious place economically. The crises of mass immigration, of drugs, of unemployment. And yet, amongst all of that, Justin Trudeau, an unserious man in serious times. Think about it. Canada was hosting the NATO summit in our country this week. Well, think of what Trudeau was doing. I mean, besides the Taylor Swift concert, I came across a brilliant summary of this on Twitter, a long-form tweet by my friend David Legg, who has worked in governments across Canada. He's the boss of Elements Capital Advisors. And I said, David, I've just got to have you on the show. And he said, well, I'm traveling through Europe right now. I said, perfect. We'll grab you in the taxi. And he joins me now via Zoom while traveling at night in Europe by taxi. David, I'm grateful to you for jamming us in. I wanted to catch you because what you wrote today really shook me awake about how childish Canada is now perceived in the world. Give me a summary of some of the points you made in your tweet.
Sure, Ezra. Well, look, we live in an increasingly dangerous world, as you know. Just out of jail for, taking a picture in a free society like Canada, because there's confusion and there's a lot of concern. And we've got two obvious wars, one in the Middle East and one in Ukraine. And then we've got a host of other security considerations all over the world right now. And Canada is completely unserious about a lot of these things and has been so for a while. And I think that the new U.S. administration coming in has made it crystal clear that that can't stand any longer. I was compelled to write a note about this because when you travel as a Canadian overseas and you see your country through the lens of the press in other countries, sometimes it's just extraordinary how different the perspective is of Canada from an overseas perspective. And, that sort of collision of seeing Toronto on fire with, Hamas supporting protesters with their face masked rioting, that did not look like Canada. And that was occurring in the context of Canada being the host of a NATO summit. So as the host country, we showed the world that we can't even keep law and order in our own core cities, even for something as important as a NATO summit, where we're in particularly sort of tough shape in trying to prove to the world that we can keep our promises to our NATO allies. We're not going to keep cheating on what it costs to be prepared in a military sense or in terms of security or intelligence sharing. And yet we dropped the ball on something as simple as hosting a summit. And then you saw the next issue, of course, was the fact that both our Prime Minister and our Minister of Foreign Affairs sided with a very dubious, absurd judgment by a very dubious ICC judge instead of aligning with our allies in Israel and obviously our allies in the United States. That led to Lindsey Graham, John Thune, Tom Cotton, a series of senators that have normally had Canada's back on issues in the past, warning us there would be economic sanctions if we persisted in crossing them on security measures as important as the relationship of the U.S. and Israel to the ICC. And then you had the Prime Minister dancing. You had Jenny Carignan at the Halifax Security Conference calling out Jim Reich, a very important senator for Canada in the trade discussions. It's just been a bonfire of liberal vanities of a country that's kind of lost its way. And I don't know what it's going to take. And you saw what it did take to sort of throw some cold water on our discussion nationally, which was Trump saying, look, I'm going to put 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico until you secure this northern border.
And And that has been a stunning shock to the Canadian system. I think some people want to feel aggrieved by Trump, and it is egregious, a 25% tariff. But to me, it's so obviously just his not his desired outcome. He's saying seal your border to illegal migrants, including potential terrorists and drugs. And he doesn't want it's not an economic weapon. He's saying, can I please have your attention? Our border is a problem. Let me give you some encouragement to shake off your dust. Mexico has already responded. Their president has said, yeah, okay, message received. Let's have a productive agreement. Canada is in a freak out. And I'm not saying I support putting tariffs on my own country. I'm just saying Trump is trying to get our attention. And I think what might happen, given how amateur and immature our government is instead of thinking seriously about, well, should we strengthen our border? Should we stop fentanyl being shipped to America? I'm worried that the government will take pot shots at Trump instead. Do you think there are any grown-ups at the PMO and the Foreign Policy Office that are trying to do the right thing here, like the Mexican president? Like, why would Canada die on the hill of illegal immigration and illegal drugs? It's not even in our interest to do so.
Well, you put your finger on it. We should be doing that for Canadians. You know, fentanyl is ripping apart families across Canada. It's one of the biggest issues that we're dealing with. Why do we have to be compelled by the American president to do the right thing for Canadian border security? Immigration is an issue that we know has been metastasizing. We've got an asylum system that's become completely fraudulent. We know that organized crime and terror laundering operations use it with impunity. Why does it take an American president to put his finger on that and say, unless you change these things that are threatening the secure northern border and changing what's been a special relationship for over 100 years, this is a new thing. And so is the loss of the confidence of U.S. senators on the Foreign Relations Committee, the intelligence committees that have always had Canada's back. They've finally said enough. So, I mean, the question I think that people that are clutching their pearls right now have to ask is, what is Trump supposed to do with this situation? Tom Hogan, who is his new border czar, said he has a 10x more likelihood of a terrorist incident coming over the northern than southern border right now, which is why they're so focused on it. It took their intel agencies to tell us about 4 different terror incidents inside our country. It took us years to follow the American demand that we named the IRGC a terrorist faction. We know there's about 600 or 700 IRGC, that's the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps, agents working within Canada. You know, what is it going to take for Canada to wake up and start to do its part in the security arrangement that has defined the best, closest working economic and military and energy security companionship in diplomatic circles? The other thing I'd say, Ezra, just quickly is, what we have to understand is that the reason the world takes us so much more seriously than our economy, the size of our economy would dictate, or that our military would dictate, or that our diplomatic prowess would dictate, is because of our close relationship with the United States. Western Europe relies on Canada to be the one that can kind of be persuasive with the U.S. when there's a close call to make, because we've always had the back of the Americans. We've always taken a position that is aligned because our interests are so aligned with theirs, and because we've had that longstanding relationship. You know, this is not meant to be adversarial. We had 25 U.S. senators from the Democrats and the Republicans send us nice long letters saying you really have to stop being NATO deadbeats. You're the worst of the 31. That's got to stop. U.S. taxpayer can't be expected to pick up the tab all the time for Canada, not doing even its most nominal commitment, making its most nominal commitment in this regard. And so the question for those that are worried is, what would you advise President Trump to do if you were a sitting U.S. senator that knew that northern border was porous, there was a fundamental problem, and that Americans were tired of paying Canada's bill for military and security?